Hello and welcome to Executive Decision, where every week we go face to face with business leaders, economic leaders on the state of the Indian economy. And tonight's Executive Decision is particularly interesting because it's just the night before the budget, a budget which, unlike budgets in the past, is going to be closely scrutinized because of the state of the Indian economy, which continues to remain in a state of slowdown. And that was confirmed by the economic survey today, which downward revised its own estimates for growth for the last financial year, or the current financial year really, if you look at where we are right now, and said that from 7% growth has been downwards revised to 5%. So the government itself seems to clearly be in a situation where it is accepting that the economy is slowing. But the real question is that how can it be addressed? How can it be fixed? And the economic survey, as I said, if you look at those graphics on the screen, is in a sense pointing to the fact that there is a slowing down. It's talking about how industrial growth has dropped from 5.9% to 2.5%, agriculture growth from 5% in 17-18 to 2.8% in 19-20, services from 8% down to 6.9%. So all the numbers suggesting that we do have a problem. Mahesh Vyas is joining us on the show tonight of the Center for Monitoring of the Indian Economy. Thanks very much indeed, Mahesh Vyas, for being on the show with us. We hope to have Vikram Kirloskar, who is, of course, the president of the Confederation of Indian Industry and also VC of Toyota, Kirloskar. He'll be on in just a second. But Mahesh Vyas, can I just ask you, before everything else, just to describe what you think is the current state of the economy. Where exactly are we? Vikram Kirloskar also is here with us. So let me just start with you, Mahesh Vyas, to tell us, where do you think we are with the economy?
Well, the economy is clearly in a slowdown mode. This is now official, but we have been seeing this for several years now. The slowdown began in 2011-12. We had a small respite from a steady slowdown in 14-15 and even in 15-16, but then it was a slide again. So it's a very long drawn slowdown that we are seeing in the economy from 11-12. This has been seen in data produced by private agencies, by company financial statements, and now the headline number like GDP, etc., is also showing the same effect that the economy is in a slowdown.
Right.
I think the slowdown is quite severe because it does not show any signs of actually turning around, and that's what is more worrying than the slowdown itself.
Okay, that same question to you, Mr. Kirloskar. Vikram Kirloskar, great to have you on the show. The same question to you first. How do you describe the current state of the Indian economy? Mahesh Vyas is saying that it is clearly slowing down and is not showing any signs of turnaround.
No, clearly it's a challenging time for industry. And we have to figure out how to get out of this. I believe there are a lot of issues. There have been structural changes. If I look at the last couple of years, there have been almost 6 lakh crores of bank write-offs, haircuts more than write-offs, and that's close to like 3% of GDP or 2 or 3% of GDP. These are large numbers. You know, unless we run a very clean society, clean industry, and clean corporate governance.
Yes.
I think we have to get into an international level of operations before we start seeing a growth in the economy. We can't afford to waste this kind of money anywhere.
Okay, you're talking of clean corporate governance and all of that. But Mr. Kirloskar, if one were to look at it in terms of concrete steps, now I remember the last time we spoke, I think that was in October. By then the big corporate tax cuts had been announced, which all of you had welcomed.
Yes.
But where is the impact of that, for instance?
No, I think you'll see the impact of the corporate tax. I think you'll start seeing projects which were probably being lost to other countries getting announced in India. I think from my company itself, you'll see more projects which we were competing with countries in Southeast Asia to invest in India. I think they'll get announced. Corporate tax reduction has certainly helped with bringing in fresh investment, definitely in my case.
Okay.
And I think this will happen across in other industries as well. If you see whether existing industries, I think it will take some more time on existing industries, because this reduction in the challenging economy and the slower growth has certainly led to some of us having excess capacity.
Right.
We've been doing a capacity planning and investment in the last 6-7 years based on a higher growth expectation.
Right.
So we do have excess capacities within our own companies, and unless they are filled, putting in new money doesn't make sense when there is excess capacity. But certainly new technology, new projects for the local market as well as for export, I think the tax cut is certainly going to help.
Okay, so excess capacity, which means you have more capacity than you can actually move, and so you're sitting on that, and that's one of the reasons you're saying that there's no point putting fresh investment when you still have excess stock that you need to offload. Mahesh Vyas, CMIE, of course.
Excess capacity, excess manufacturing capacity.
Excess manufacturing capacity, yes. Mahesh Vyas, CMIE, of course, tracks corporate investment, tracks earnings, and are you seeing at all any change in that, or do you continue to see a decline in both investments and in earnings?
Well, Mr. Kirloskar put it very nicely. He said that the corporate tax rate cut will help in getting some investments back into action, and what was best is that he said his own company and group is considering putting some investments in response to the tax rate cut, which is really very nice, because the rest of what Mr. Kirloskar said is the worry, which is that capacity utilization is still, whether you use the RBI's OBCUS or you look at the asset utilization ratio that we study on a continuous basis based on balance sheet data, capacity utilization or asset utilization is extremely low currently, and even return on investments is extremely low. Given that, we have seen 2018-19, the last year for which the financial statements are available for a large set of companies, net fixed asset growth was the lowest in nearly 30 years.
30 years.
So I think it will take in 30 years. So I think it will take a very long time for the turnaround to come about, because the asset utilization is still extremely low. The cut in corporate tax rates will help, but it will take a long time for that to kick in.
So, Mr. Kirloskar, then, in a nutshell, and I guess this is the question that we've all been grappling with for the past year, and despite the government coming up with several measures, by the way, not just the tax cut, but there were a whole host of other measures, including trying to infuse liquidity into real estate, into the banking sector, and so on. The question that we're all grappling with is that if this is a demand-driven slowdown, a consumer-driven slowdown, how do you get that picked up? And what could the government, or ought the government to be doing?
See, there's also, like I've explained earlier somewhere, I think there's also a little bit of a structural change in the economy. If I look at my own industry, the auto industry, in maybe 2-3 years ago, there were 2 cities with metros. 2 or 3 cities. Now we have 18 cities with metros.
Right.
We have shared mobility, which has increased tremendously.
Right.
These have certainly affected the industry.
Right.
Okay. Second is, if I look at inflation, I think this is my own understanding. I'm not an economist, but my own understanding. If you look at inflation in the last couple of years, it has been very, very low, and so have salary increases. What I see in Bangalore's general salary increase in the last couple of years have been much lower than in previous years. So a person buying a high-ticket item like a car, and he's looking at retail finance, and he's looking at the EMI versus the potential salary increase he will get, I think that makes him more cautious.
Okay. So that's as far as
the current situation. It's difficult itself to get a loan right now compared to 2 years ago. but he's also on his own account, on his own prospects,
Right.
is cautious about doing
But
so.
Mr. Kirloskar,
And I'm sure it applies to a lot of other consumer goods.
Well, Mr. Kirloskar, I mean, this becomes a bit of a cycle, because one of the assumptions was that by lowering corporate taxes, that would incentivize corporates like yourself to actually pass that on down the chain, that, you know, corporates would be increasing salaries, giving more healthy increments, and then that would spur consumer demand. But it's not clear if that's happening.
Listen, Mr. Jain, you know, you will give tax, you know, your tax cut really becomes applicable when you make a lot of profit and you're making more profit than before.
Right.
Right now, it's challenging to make a profit itself. Okay.
Okay.
When you're in, say, example in the auto industry, which is down by 14–15%.
Right.
It's a challenge trying to keep your head above water financially. So where's the question of paying tax? You know, of having a profitable profit where the tax cut will make a difference.
Okay. Is that
I think the tax cut is something which makes India attractive as an investment destination more than anything else.
But is that Mahesh Vyas, do you buy that argument that corporates say, look, you know, you may have cut corporate taxes, but you can't really expect us to pass on the benefits to either employees or you know, reduce prices for consumers, because we still have this demand problem. Is that a fair argument or not?
Well, I would expect corporates to behave in interest of maximization of their profits. There is no reason why they should pass on the benefits of tax cuts to labor. It does not make sense. The price of labor will be determined by the demand and supply of labor.
Okay.
And right now we see that the unemployment rate for graduates is extremely high, which means that there are less jobs available than graduates available in the markets.
Right.
And any entrepreneur who says, because I got tax rate cuts, I'll pass it on to labor, is actually not getting his business right, in my opinion.
Okay, that's an interesting view, because the government had actually positioned the tax cuts as a stimulus, perhaps not even necessarily a direct but an indirect stimulus, saying that the benefits would be passed on down the chain. But both of you seem to suggest that that might be perhaps somewhat premature to make that assumption. But then tell me, Mahesh Vyas, that how do you then stimulate demand? Should the government, as many people have been saying, just go on a spending spree and spend your way out of this crisis? And also, if so, spend where? Because that's also important.
Yeah, this question can become very complicated. Where do you spend? How much do you spend? And for what do you spend? So on and so forth. I think what is important is to use the budget of fiscal operations to spur growth and therefore to spend money targeted that will have a big multiplier effect.
Targeted
so if
where?
Money is allocated to projects.
Targeted where?
So if money is targeted to projects which are yet to take off, which are new projects, that will be a misallocation. It will take a long time for that money to take effect.
Okay.
But if, for example, more money is given in the hands of, say, consumers through Manrega, or extend the reach of Manrega, or put more money more aggressively into projects which are nearly half complete or more than half complete to ensure they get completed, then the impact of that expenditure will be higher.
Okay. So you're saying so yes, sorry, Mr. Kirloskar, I was actually going to ask you the same question. Go ahead, sir.
I agree with what Mr. Vyas is saying. You know, there are two areas in my mind we have to focus on with the spending. One is on completion of infrastructure projects which will actually benefit the economy by loosening the knots or untying knots in the economic or bottlenecks in the economy.
Yeah.
There are infrastructure bottlenecks, how to loosen those up.
Yeah.
That is one part. And the second part is to support the rural economy and the farmer.
Right.
How to make the farmer more efficient, how to improving farmer income, to my mind, is paramount to India. It not only on a society, we have to carry all of society with us with whatever we do.
Right.
But how can we do it through better efficiency, better engineering, science and technology, not just MSP. We have to figure that one out and invest in it. So invest in, when you do rural infrastructure, do it in ponds and irrigation and many other things in the rural areas, which will make farmers and the rural people rural economy a lot stronger.
But you know,
my whole thing is let farmers get rich and leave the industry alone.
Okay, interesting. The only question is, and we'll get the clearer numbers perhaps tomorrow on the budget, but as we know, the government is facing a cash crunch. So the budget estimate for net tax revenue was projected at 16.5 lakh crores. Actuals until November of last year was only 7 lakh crore. So that's only 45%. I know, there's still 3 months earnings to be counted, but there's a possibility of a fairly significant shortfall. How does the government get around that? Very quickly, starting with you, Mr. Vyas, and then I'll take that to Mr. Kirloskar.
Well, I think you should see it this way. If the government does not take any bold steps now, the tax collection can get worse next year. So if growth does not come out of its current logjam, what will happen? The growth can go down even further, and then tax collections will get worse. And the challenge to get the economy out of its logjam will become even more worse.
Right.
So it's better we bite the bullet now than wait anymore.
Mr. Kirloskar?
Yeah, I agree. We have to break the cycle somehow, and perhaps spending more is one issue. Spending more and spending wisely and faster asset sales is another issue. There are a lot of assets like Air India. I think now they're going very fast on it, but I think that should be done in a larger manner and a more comprehensive manner and a faster manner. But we'll have to go through with this. There's no two ways about it.
Okay.
We're going to face some inflation. We'll have to just learn to. We've lived with higher inflation in the past.
Sure.
We'll learn to live with some inflation for maybe a year or two. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in fact, that's something which some have also been pointing out to, that in 2008, the then government actually, just bust the fiscal deficit and tried to spend its way out of the slowdown. And at least for 2 years that worked. We'll have to wait and see if indeed that is what the government has on its plate. We shall have Nirmala Sitharaman's Bahikatha before us shortly tomorrow in the morning. But thank you, gentlemen. It was a pleasure to talk to you on Executive Decision. We'll have to leave it there. Good night.